It was a quiet Sunday morning in suburban Ohio. The sun had just peeked through the curtains, spilling golden light into the living room where George sat, slumped in his favorite recliner. He had lived in this house for over 30 years. This house had been the scene of birthday parties, holiday dinners, school projects, and late-night talks with his children. And yet, somehow, over time, it had become unfamiliar. The house was too quiet now, too empty. The laughter, the chaos, the smell of cookies baking on a winter afternoon. It all felt like memories from someone else's life. George's children, Alex and Emily, had grown up, moved out, and built lives of their own. They called occasionally, but the calls were brief, polite, and mostly about logistics. When George would pick them up for holidays or reminders about the doctor's appointments. But those calls, once filled with warmth and chatter, now felt hollow. George sipped his coffee slowly, staring at the framed photographs on the mantel. Pictures of family vacations, of birthday cakes, of graduation ceremonies. Emily's smile in her high school graduation picture seemed so far away, almost like it belonged to someone else. He could still hear her laughter echoing in the hallways. Alex's first baseball trophy sat on a shelf, dusty and ignored. The trophies, the photos, the toys, everything seemed frozen in time, reminders of a life that had moved on without him. He remembered time, not so long ago, when the house was alive. Weekends were never quiet. Emily and Alex would argue over who got the last slice of pizza. The living room would be covered in school projects and board games. George and his wife, Linda, would sit at the kitchen table, watching their children with a mixture of pride and exasperation. Those days had been chaotic, exhausting, and yet filled with an energy George now longed for. Linda had passed away 5 years ago. Her absence left a void that was impossible to fill. She had been the glue that held the family together. After her death, George tried to keep the family connected, but something had shifted. Alex and Emily were always busy, preoccupied with their own families, their own responsibilities. The calls became rarer, the visits even rarer, and slowly, George realized something he had never imagined. He had become a stranger in his own home. It wasn't that George blamed his children. Life in America was fast-paced. Careers, social obligations, parenting, it all took time. But the feeling of being unseen, of being forgotten by the very people you had sacrificed everything for, was heavy. Sometimes he would sit in the living room, holding a cup of tea, and just listen. The house was quiet, but it was the kind of quiet that presses against your chest, the silence that reminds you of what's missing. One Thursday evening, George decided to clean the attic. It was something he hadn't done in years. He wanted to see the old memories, to feel close to his family, even if they were far away. As he climbed the creaky stairs, he opened boxes filled with childhood toys, old school books, and letters. A dusty envelope caught his eye. It was addressed to him in Emily's handwriting from 15 years ago. He opened it carefully. Inside was a small note. "Dear Dad, thank you for always being there. I hope I make you proud." George smiled through his tears. He folded the note carefully and put it back in the envelope. It felt like a small thread connecting him to the past, a reminder that love had always been there, even if it wasn't visible now. The next day, George decided to do something he hadn't done in a long time. He wrote an email to both Alex and Emily. Not a lecture, not a complaint, just words from the heart. "Dear Alex and Emily, I hope you're doing well. I miss our times together. I know life is busy and full of responsibilities, but I want to tell you that this house feels very quiet without you. I miss the laughter, the chaos, and even the arguments we had. You have always been my pride and joy. I hope we can find some time soon to be together. Not for a holiday, not for an event, but just to be a family. Love, Dad." He hesitated before hitting send, unsure if they would respond or if they even understood what he was feeling. But he pressed send anyway. It felt like a small act of courage, a step towards bridging the distance that had grown over the years. A week later, George received a video call from Emily. She looked tired, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. Alex joined a few moments later, juggling a toddler on one arm. For the first time in months, George's living room felt alive again. They didn't have a long conversation about achievements or responsibilities. They talked about small things: the weather, the garden, the old dog, and even the dusty attic. Emily laughed at some old joke from her childhood. Alex shared a story about his toddler's mischief. George realized something important in that moment. Distance didn't erase love. Time didn't erase memories. And though the world outside was fast and demanding, the bond between parent and child could never truly fade. It only waited for moments like these to be rekindled. Over the next few weeks, George made a conscious effort to stay connected. He sent little notes called once a week and made plans to visit Alex and Emily. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes he felt the sting of being overlooked, but he also learned patience and the importance of small gestures. Every call, every visit, Every laugh shared was a reminder that he was not a stranger, no matter how distant things seemed. One evening, as George sat in his recliner, he looked around the living room. The photographs, the trophies, the memories, they no longer felt like reminders of isolation. They felt like chapters of a story still being written. And in that quiet house, George found peace, knowing that love, even when silent, was never lost. Because sometimes parents do feel like strangers in their own home, but the connections they built, the sacrifices they made, and the love they gave quietly wait patiently for the family to remember. And when that memory returns, even briefly, it brings warmth to a heart that thought it had grown cold.